The offseason of attrition and decisions continues to roll along, with Auburn getting some nice surprises as well as its fair share of disappointments with people deciding to leave or stay at Auburn. We got two huge announcements on the same day on Wednesday, and I wanted to discuss who those two were, the impact of them staying on the football program for the upcoming season. Welcome to the E2C Network, where the Auburn family speaks. Our content here and on our podcast network may tend to be Auburn sports heavy, but if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you never miss any content. And thank you to members of our booster club like Devin Wistrom, who help produce videos like this. I did a video recently breaking down the decision of Kobe Hudson and the issues that have arisen between him and the program and the coaches or whatever is going on, and his decision to transfer out from Auburn, which was very disappointing at the time because of the way it was going to negatively impact not just, I think, maybe his career, but also the Auburn program as well. But you have to realize you don't always have all the information, and so sometimes you just have to assume everyone's making the best decision for themselves at the time. Well, we got some news not too many days after that of some good things in terms of wide receivers, but also in the special teams areas, and we've got confirmation that Shedrick Jackson and Anders Carlson have decided to return to Auburn for another year. Now, both were seniors, but they are using that extra year of eligibility that all players received during the pandemic to be able to come back one more time. And I think this is two very smart decisions made by these guys for themselves, but also for the team, seeing the value of them coming back for another season. So I'm going to take a second and maybe just talk through each of those and the impact that it has on each of their particular areas. And maybe we can come to a decision on who's the bigger impact. Not to say that one is more important than the other, but just who might have the most immediate impact. Let's talk about Shedrick Jackson first, and I want to talk about some stats just in the wide receiver realm to give you some perspective. Again, Kobe Hudson, who decided to leave, you can go check that video out with us breaking all that down if you want to in the earlier in the week video lineup. But he was the leading receiver in all of the stat categories thus far, so you're already losing your top receiver. Shedrick was right behind him with 40 receptions, 527 yards, 13.2 per catch, a long of 48, and only one touchdown on the year. Now, there were several times that Shedrick Jackson dropped some balls, and as many of the receivers did, let's be honest, he wasn't the only culprit this season, but he was a reliable receiver at times for Auburn, especially Bo Nix. They seem to have a pretty decent connection. We'll see if that connection continues with whoever is quarterbacking next year. But the fact of the matter remains that when you look at this, Auburn is now returning its second leading receiver, which is going to be huge in terms of leadership and experience on the field, because after him is Demetrius Robertson. He's gone. John Samuel Shanker's back, but he's a tight end and he has other responsibilities other than catching. After that, it's Javarius Johnson, who only had 19 receptions. So you can see right off the bat how necessary it was to not only have Shedrick back, but John Samuel Shanker as well in terms of having some leadership back on the field for 2022. One of the questions that I'm asking myself is, did Kobe Hudson's decision help Shedrick Jackson decide to stay? I don't know that it had the most definitive impact on his decision, but I gotta think it helped because I think he sees the opportunity that we all see for him to rise to the occasion and be the leader of the wide receivers, not only in spirit, but also on the field as well for 2022. Let's just think about this. When you've got Javarius Johnson, Zevion Capers as your two most prominent names in your wide receiver room with everybody else leaving, they need some time to mature, and giving this guy the opportunity to lead is going to give them that time to move into a role that's going to be in their court in the coming years if they choose to stay. It also gives some of their new recruits coming in some time to acclimate to the system and everything before they probably see some extra time as well. I think the next most immediate impact is, what will Auburn do in terms of transfer wide receivers? A lot of people have been asking that while our focus has been on quarterbacks and offensive linemen. I think there's probably still room for one more. I don't have a name out there, but I could see a world where we do go after one wide receiver transfer if someone was available and they had mutual interest in Auburn. But with Shed back, it doesn't now make it a necessity to go out there and get someone because there's a lot of talent here in Auburn. Shed coming back, I think, is going to pay huge dividends for himself and for Auburn. Let's talk about Mr. Carlson 2.0, Mr. Anders Carlson, Legatron 2.0, whatever you want to label him. I was so excited to have him back, and this is selfish of me because I am a former kicker. I want to talk about some stats for him as well. And let's be honest, Anders probably hasn't had as successful of a time as Daniel Carlson has at Auburn. But, that was a pretty, high standard to set. He's just tearing it up in the NFL right now after he got rejected by Minnesota. I'm never going to stop letting them live that down. Here are the stats for Anders Carlson. He was 35 of 36 this year of extra points. That one weird one that every kicker for Auburn seems to have when they break some record or lose the record for missing an extra point inexplicably. Usually it's a bad snap or something like that. He made 14 of his 21 field goal attempts for a 66.7% accuracy. He was 100% from 20 to 29 yards, 50% from 30 to 39 yards. He made 6 of 8 from 40 to 49, but he was 0 for 3 from 50 plus. Now, granted, we put him in some very tough situations in those 50 plus scenarios, so you got to admit that even with that distance, it's pretty tough to accomplish that. His long of the year was just below 50 at 49 yards total, and he accounted for 77 points. With an offense that is still trying to find its foundation, there's going to be some struggles to finish again this year on offense, which means that you're going to need an experienced kicker to be able to knock that ball through the uprights when we're not able to get in the end zone. Just prepare yourself, Auburn fans. That's going to happen, but hopefully not as much as this year. The question I'm asking is, did the injury make him decide to come back? And I think that's a pretty obvious answer, but I'm also curious, would he have decided to stay if he had not gotten injured? Kickers don't typically get drafted. You have to be absolutely outstanding to get drafted. They usually get picked up in free agency where they win their long-term jobs like Daniel Carlson has, but he did get drafted. So I wonder if the injury actually played in this decision mostly for him to stay. So I think he had a conversation with the coaches alongside the coaches having a conversation with Alex McPherson, who's going to be the guy coming up behind him, and looks like he's the best kicker we've seen in quite some time coming out of high school, nearly missing a 70-yard field goal in an attempt. But I don't know that you're going to see Alex McPherson a lot this season. I do wonder, will they split some of the duties sometimes to start getting him acclimated? But then again, you got to think about this. Is it better for them to just let him grow and learn in his first year and save him for a redshirt year, which would mean that Auburn would then have a kicker solidified for the next 5 years? That's incredible time that you don't have to worry about that. And I hate to say it this way, but waste a scholarship on a kicker. Now, if the best one comes along somewhere down the line when Alex is getting up in his upperclassman years, then you definitely need to go after him and definitely need to take him if you can. But I think there are huge benefits for Anders himself, but also the Auburn kicking side of things, that they're going to benefit from him choosing to stay one more year. I'd love to see him go out with a bang and have a great end to his career just like Daniel Carlson did. Final question for this video is, who is the bigger impact? And, like I said, this is not really a one's more important than the other, but I think you can, instead of saying bigger impact, who's the most immediate impact? And I think that's Shed. I mean, obviously the wide receiver room was one of the Achilles heel of this team this year, and I think having that leadership, as we've talked about, is going to pay immediate dividends on the field for Auburn. Long-term impact is Anders Carlson, like we already addressed, with allowing Alex McPherson time to grow and learn, and maybe even get some time in there without wasting a year and be able to use that redshirt year in his first time at Auburn. So that's my overall thoughts of the two announcements of Anders Carlson and Shedrick Jackson deciding to stay. Happy to have them back and excited to see how they end their careers at Auburn. If you enjoy this type of content, please help support it by smashing that like button. And if you want more content from us, be sure to hit the subscribe along with the notification bell so you don't miss an upload or a live stream. There's also other ways to help support us listed in the description of this video. You can become a channel member here on YouTube, or you can go over to patreon.com/E2C Network to join the E2C Network Booster Club. Both of those things start at $1 a month. Thank you for tuning into the E2C Network, where the Auburn family speaks. War Eagle.